Yeah, these guys are actually going on. I think it's probably wrapped. I don't know. Okay, whatever. LinkedIn's not going to happen. Okay, let's get rid of that then. Not approved for LinkedIn Live. Okay.
Do you use a Restreamer or StreamYard?
StreamYard, yeah. I've used a bunch. I used this for AMAs. So okay, we're actually hey everybody. So let me actually go back now. Pre-live. Wait for this to go. Everybody, welcome to the first in a series of interviews that we're going to be doing here at CoinMetro. I'm joined here by Artur Schaback from Paxful. It's the first one on the list. I think it's going to be an interesting one. Our topic today is, what's the future of Bitcoin? And obviously with some news that's come out over the past, well, to be honest, the news in the last probably 12 years, but in the news in the last couple of weeks, it really started to propel, I think, Bitcoin in the minds and hearts of a lot more people around the world. So it's been an interesting conversation. I'm Kevin Merkel. I'm CEO here at CoinMetro. If you haven't seen me before, I do a lot of these things. And today, like I said, I'm sharing it with Artur. I'm going to let Artur introduce himself, and then we're going to jump into this conversation about, well, future of Bitcoin. So Artur.
Hey, thanks for inviting me here.
You're very welcome.
So I'm Artur. Basically, 6 years ago, we founded Paxful with my co-founder, Ray Youssef, in New York. So he's a native New Yorker. And then I just came to US, and we always had this idea about like help the little guy, and Bitcoin was perfect for that. Like people could, like underbanked and unbanked people, Bitcoin does not cause any friction for transactions, for payments, for all that. And then we see value in that. And that's why Paxful is where it is now, because we follow that philosophy still till now. And the second philosophy is that product has to be super simple. Like we're thinking like, oh, if your grandmother can use the product, we'll figure out. Yeah. Then everybody else will do. Like you will, me, right? But first is the grandma has to figure out. So the simplicity, ease of use.
It's a very good point. So I know when I talk a lot about, well, Bitcoin for sure, but when I talk about crypto in general, there's always this talk about UI, UX in crypto. So I remember getting on the internet, 94, 95, a long time ago. And I think three people.
These animations, the GIFs.
Yeah, literally, it was a baud modem, which is about this big. It made so much noise. I had to go in the basement to use it. I had a phone cord running upstairs. There was only one phone plug in the house, so I'd have to take it, from in my mother's room, actually connect the long dial-up cable.
And mother was upset; she couldn't.
Exactly. She would get on the phone and hear, and get pissed off at me. And not many people were on the internet. When you got on the internet, it was a blank screen. The user experience on the internet was absolutely horrible.
Alta Vista, right?
Yeah, and even before Alta Vista, literally browserless, just a blank screen with DOS prompts to be able to access chat rooms. It was kind of like the world's first 4chan, to be fair. I mean, they were quite brutal chat rooms, but yeah, that's what existed, and I thought it was cool. I had a couple of friends that thought it was cool. My mom didn't think it was cool. My mom thought it was crazy. My grandmother definitely wasn't using the internet, that's for sure. Didn't even know what it was, to be fair. And I think we might be slightly past that stage, but we're still in the stage of really bad user experience, where imagine a normal person, a normie, right? The guy that's on the street, he says, I want to buy some Bitcoin. You go, sure. Okay, so you want to buy yourself a hardware wallet? You want to get a 24 seed phrase, or make sure you don't lose that seed phrase? You get your private key that's in the thing. Then you get your public key that you want to give to other people to send. By the time you get to the point of, buying Bitcoin, the brain has exploded and it's just not working.
Yeah, so look, I think the same way, right? There's a few things. There's no silver bullet that's going to solve everything. Like one answer that we can make it simple to use. And the second thing is, I think people don't have a goal what they can do with Bitcoin. So people in the emerging world, they know why they need Bitcoin, because like in Venezuela or somewhere,
very good point.
They don't have a normal access to banks, right? So they have to figure out something to do. Yeah. And when people need to do that, they get creative, right?
Yeah.
Me and you, like, we don't have to figure out. I would be all fine without Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing. People are asking, like, hey, I want to start using Bitcoin. What should I do? Like, or how do I make money with Bitcoin, right? Like all this, like, but first we need to have a goal, because then you will figure this out. So I can bring an example. I got into DeFi like 3 months ago in June, and I had a goal. Like I have my sitting Ethereum for 2 years that I'm not using.
Yeah.
I want to make money, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just farm as much as I can, and 3 months later, I'll see my experiment, how much I made.
Yeah.
So I made about 15%,
Yeah.
and no trading risk, pure farming. And the same way, like you want to start using Bitcoin, you're curious, you set up a goal for yourself, right? Like that's with anything. I know in 2014 or 12 and then 13, I really started to get into Bitcoin. Okay, that's cool technology. I bought it, sold it. I sent it to a friend.
Yeah.
Because I had a goal. So that's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So what do you mentioned before we went on camera that you used to be a Bitcoin maximalist. So you mentioned one thing that's really key in that Bitcoin, and I've had many conversations about this as well. There's some people that are in their heart say, Bitcoin is a currency. There's others that say it's a store of value. There's others that say it's a hedge against inflation. Yeah, so it's one of the first things that we've ever seen really in finance that's dynamic. It's a dynamic asset. It's literally how you see it and how you use it that defines what it is. But if you could pick, are you in that? If you had to pick one between, let's say, store of value and say on the other side, currency or means of payment, where do you think most of the value lies, in Bitcoin? What's at least maybe personally, and then maybe on a broader, like for globally speaking, why is Bitcoin important? Is it because it can store value and it's like a hedge against inflation, which obviously is going to become more and more of an issue, obviously with what's happening with the printer and the print presses and the money being printed.
Money printing.
Yeah. Or is it the other side? Is it more about places like Venezuela and places like where it's definitely a means of payment, so they can move money out of the country, but at the same time, it's also, I guess, it's probably both things. But what's your view on that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I think maybe 6 years ago, it was everything, like a store of value. There was only Litecoin and the Feder coin.
Yeah.
That's a few coins, right?
Yeah.
And it was store of value, means of payments, everything, right? Now it's getting less, more focused because you have alternatives.
Yeah.
For store of value, okay, you have Bitcoin. Okay, you can have it because it appreciates in value. But then you have stable coins. And then if you can use USDT, right? And it's dollar value because you don't know when the Bitcoin is going to tank. So it gives choice to people. And then, as I said, it's a programmable money so that you can do anything with that. That's true.
Yeah.
But again, there's Ethereum that has Turing complete blockchain where you can do much cooler things easier. And now, fortunately or unfortunately, on Ethereum, there's a lot more dApps. And so Bitcoin is still used and it's going to be used. But it's going to be used. I think it's used because it has bigger market cap, liquidity, market cap, more tools, more wallets, more integrations. That's what Bitcoin is here, and it's going to stay. And then again, you see that the big corporations are buying Bitcoin for their reserves. Because again, it's a hedge against the dollar. I don't want dollar to collapse, or I don't want the world to end. Right? I want the world to be a stable place, but there's a risk, and big companies understand it, right? Yeah. So they hedge their cash reserves with 1-10% in Bitcoin, which is mature. They can do this.
Exactly. I think it's amazing to see how far Bitcoin's gone, even in 2 years. In 12 years, obviously, it's a massive step forward. But even in the last year, 2 years, even during all this COVID nonsense, we're starting to see. By the way, if anybody's wondering why we're not wearing masks, Estonia is actually, I think, has the lowest count of infections in the entirety of Europe, and one of the lowest countries in the world. So yeah, just in case you're wondering,
we're still 6 feet away. I'm in my comfort zone.
Yeah, we're still distancing, but yeah, just in case you're wondering. So we saw this news on this same line. We saw this news lately about PayPal. So I saw a post on Twitter, on crypto Twitter, obviously, but I saw a post on Twitter. It was, I don't remember, I think it was Eric Voorhees who posted it, but it was Eric Voorhees, I think Roger Ver, and somebody else was in the photo. And he told this story about back in 2012, they pooled their money together, because at the time, obviously, they didn't have much. So they pooled their money together to get a stand for, I think, Bitcoin.com, maybe. And it was in a convention center, and they purposely put it next to PayPal because they wanted to get a lot of foot traffic. And you see this photo, and you see the guys in the PayPal booth, and they're not even, they're looking this way.
What year was it?
2012, I think, 11 or 12. Yeah. And so and the story kind of goes that, PayPal didn't pay attention to them. And well, obviously they're not the owners of Bitcoin per se, But as far as just the figure looks, they were representing this kind of new move into cryptocurrency. It was laughed at. I know I got laughed at on a few stages. Even in 2017, still people were laughing. Regulators weren't understanding. Can't say they fully understand yet. But this news about PayPal. So let's dissect that a bit, right? So I'm sure you heard the news. Obviously, for the kind of Bitcoin maximalists, it's not really big news because you can't move your Bitcoin off. You can't deposit Bitcoin onto PayPal. It's just like this closed system. Yeah. But it's 330 million people that now have access to buy and hold Bitcoin and spend it inside of a massive ecosystem. So from personal level, what do you think? I mean, is that interesting? Why is it interesting? And from a business level for Paxful, what is it? Are you guys worried about that? Do you think is it complementary? Does it help? Like what's the
so I think why PayPal decided to do it this way, of course, they follow the Cash App.
Yeah. Because
Cash App has already for years Bitcoin like selling, buying, sending out as well.
Yeah.
So obviously, again, they are not sure what if Bitcoin and blockchain takes over the payments in 5-10 years, and they will be left behind.
Yeah.
Like Blockbuster. So maybe this is the Blockbuster moment for them.
Yeah.
Because we have the same thing at Paxful, right? Like we implemented USDT, so you can buy, sell, send out Tether.
Yeah.
Before we didn't have.
Yeah. But
we understand that the space is evolving, so we need to implement these things. And again, we need to have an ecosystem, B2B2C, that people are sending out from Paxful somewhere, like to exchanges, or they do some payments with the e-commerce. We actually want them to stay in our platform, right? Or I don't know, they send to other wallets because they're like savings account, but hey, we want to have everything within us. So, and that is the case with PayPal, I believe as well, that there's this alternative payment system and they don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah. Do you think we know that like Revolut here in Europe did something similar to PayPal, where they have this kind of closed loop system. And I know that at CoinMetro, we were in discussion with a company called Currency Cloud for quite some time about possibly using them in some way, shape, or form for additional fiat on-ramps.
Okay.
And they told us that they were fine with onboarding us, but we wouldn't be able to allow cryptocurrency to leave our ecosystem. And Currency Cloud actually underpins like 80% of payments that go off of Revolut end up getting sent out by Currency Cloud, especially in the US. So it's like one of the reasons why Revolut hasn't gone and done the full all-in crypto is because their service providers don't allow them to do it. It's not even the regulator, it's not even their own. It's if they do it, they may lose a service provider. And I know I've felt that kind of same at CoinMetro. That happens a lot, where we want to do something, we pass it along to our banking partners, and they're like, no, you can do it, but we're going to close your account.
So basically custody, right? They're basically this invisible layer for the end users, right? That do not allow this innovation or all these things.
Exactly. So like from the business side, from like Paxful side, I'm sure you guys probably run into the same thing where, occasionally you want to do something, or maybe it's a regulatory reason, maybe it's just a business reason, maybe there's a risk decision, whatever, but you're kind of, as you start to grow, as you become more, let's say, I don't want to use the word reputable, it's not the right word, but as you become more regulated, as you become more kind of aware of things you need to do, you also start to get kind of your wings clipped a bit. So
I wouldn't say it's per se like this clipped. The process is slower because we're getting the state licensing in every state in US, right?
Yeah.
And then
which you can now do with one application almost.
Yeah.
Which is good, I guess.
So whenever we want to release something new, like we have to tell to the regulator, this is how it is, this is the flow of funds. And whenever the fiat is involved, right? So we need to explain the flow of funds. And that's why, you can just use some partners who handle fiat yourself, or there are ways, but it does slow you down. That's my point.
Yeah.
You can find somebody else who can do that for you.
Exactly. Well, it's great that you say that, because I think as I've seen, because my first kind of encounter with Paxful was about 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago at this point. And I think it wasn't a completely different business. Obviously, the business itself, the model hasn't really changed. But I think the core of it, to me, I saw a much different business to what I see today. And I remember talks, just in the small talks that I had about, competitors like local Bitcoin being, massive, and Paxful growing and trying to get there. And now I think you guys have surpassed them by quite a leap and bound, which is amazing. And congratulations for that. And how the companies have matured. I think how crypto has matured in general. And that maturing of kind of crypto in general, I think, has helped Bitcoin mature. And Bitcoin maturing means, well, more people coming into Bitcoin, more people interested to come into Bitcoin, companies like PayPal coming into Bitcoin, et cetera, and just expanding the user base, which I think at the end of the day is good for all of us. I mean, I don't see PayPal even to CoinMetro as a competitor per se. I think who really probably gets burned from PayPal is Coinbase. And the reason is that Coinbase's whole idea is we want to be the first place you touch, especially the US. Yeah. You touch us first, we charge you an arm and a leg. The fees are nonsense. But we're the first one you touch. It's easy. You click a few buttons, you get your USD, you get dollars in, you make your purchases. Now PayPal just opened up the door to pretty much almost every adult US citizen that has a PayPal, which is almost everybody, can now do that probably maybe the same price, initially expensive, but eventually maybe even cheaper. And I think the one company maybe in the industry that really probably feels a bit of heat behind it might be Coinbase. Seems to me like they're kind of gunning for the same, because once you're on, imagine you're on PayPal and you realize, oh, Bitcoin, cool, and it goes up and you feel like you're making money.
I never thought about that point. That's a really valid point, but Coinbase could be in trouble. Like, I'm just thinking like why Coinbase the price for Bitcoin is so expensive. Like, okay, they want to make money, right? But then maybe there's all this fraud issues too they have to deal with.
Sure, there's definitely costs.
With ACH payments, credit card payments, right? There's always some percentage of that happening. And if PayPal has an edge over that, they can offer cheaper, easier wallet. PayPal has money, they want to buy like Bitcoin infrastructure like BitGo or whoever else, so they can overrun others. But for us, actually, this is not a competitor per se, because I mean, if you don't need to use Paxful, you can go to Coinbase anyway. Because you use Paxful if you want to get faster. Because in Coinbase, for example, as a new user, I know you want to buy with a bank account, you have to link it, you have to do this micro deposit, wait 3 business days, only then, right? But when you're like all FOMO, right, the price goes up, you want it right away, right? And you act by emotions. So, and you can do that on Paxful because it's not anymore that us are taking the risk, right? It's the seller and who are really good, like they have really good fraud prevention skills. So they sell you instantly.
And it's their own business. You kind of act as a conduit. It's their own business. So
they're like their own money service businesses on Paxful, right? So and that's our edge over Coinbase. So and same with the PayPal too. Like, okay, we have our Pay with Paxful product out there, which is not really known yet, but I believe it's going to be super amazing once we get it, like once we flesh it out for merchants. So again, PayPal checkout is not a competitor for Pay with Paxful because you're paying with one of these 300 payment methods that we have on the platform.
Correct.
And then one of our sellers is processing the payment for you as a buyer on the e-commerce. And then the merchant receives Bitcoin or stablecoin, or eventually we're going to do the fiat off-ramp for the merchant, right? The cash out. So we're kind of complementing PayPal this way.
And you take significant less risk. So your business model is much different than PayPal. Whereas PayPal takes on extreme risk because they control more of that flow. They don't have those intermediaries, which is what makes you guys a little more flexible. So you can do things that PayPal can't.
And we enable like 4 billion new users, right? So let's say it's a really good example. Let's say there's an e-commerce store in US. They do not sell to the South, right? To like emerging world, because again, there's a chargeback risk, or that's one side. And then the second is like, for example, in Thailand, you cannot buy more than $200 online because the central bank is limiting not because they don't want to, because they don't have dollar reserves in central bank. So now, as a Paxful user, you can buy in that US store with Western Union.
Exactly.
With Western Union, and the US store is getting Bitcoin or we cash out for him, and this vendor, he gave the Bitcoin. So there's
everybody gets what they want without having to.
So and that's amazing, like 4 billion new people.
It's definitely one of the dynamic use cases of crypto, that's for sure.
Yes.
So I guess I'm going to ask one more question, guys. By the way, guys, if you have questions, make sure you ask them wherever you are. If you're in the Facebook live stream, the event stream, ask them there, right in the comment section. If you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube, ask them there. I already see a couple that came through, and we'll get to those shortly. So I'm gonna put one more question there, which I think is quite interesting, and that's, when we were going through, let's say the ICO bubble, and ICO tokens were coming out left and right. We had, tokens every which way and forward. There used to be this kind of, the FOMO and hype was really centered around like exchange listings. So when the tier 1 exchange got listed, the price would skyrocket but over time, that's become less and less, let's say, of a push for a token. As the market matures, the market looks for other things. Not that it doesn't have some type, a Coinbase listing used to mean, you were going up 300x on the day of the listing. Right. And not so much anymore. It's not so much. Now it's just, they're on Coinbase, right? Now I have another place to buy it. It's not a big deal anymore. And with Bitcoin, we've seen over the history that 10 years, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, if 2 years ago JP Morgan came out and said, an analyst from JP Morgan said Bitcoin's going to go 3x potentially, it would have probably pushed Bitcoin up by 30 to 40%, to be fair. It would have been a massive push. It would happen very fast. Or if you had equally bad news where some regulator was going to start monitoring transactions for only $250 instead of $3,000, like FinCEN is thinking to do, it would crash Bitcoin. It would have crashed by 15, 20% on that news. Probably would have come back, but you would have had a lot more volatility. And we're starting to see that volatility lessen. PayPal news, definitely probably one of the drivers for why Bitcoin is moving. But there's so many other catalysts as well. So it's not just, it's not kind of a lone wolf. So do you think we're getting to the point where Bitcoin starts to become really like an uncorrelated asset? Like the whole dream of all fund managers was that Bitcoin wasn't going to in times of crisis, Bitcoin was not going to correlate. We had COVID crisis and Bitcoin correlated.
It did, yeah.
Like big time. Then it's stuck. Now it's got days where it doesn't, weeks where it doesn't. But are we finally getting to that point with PayPal and JP Morgan's and all these, and Fidelity and all these big companies that are finally starting to pump in enough liquidity? Not on the deliverable side probably, but maybe on the futures and synthetic side. But we're getting enough input now where those news stories don't really cause so much. Are we now through that? Do you think we're kind of through that nonsense? Or are we still hype driven for the most part?
I think it's hype, and honestly, it's still hype. But like, if we expand the answer that every time, like every day, Bitcoin is still there. It's giving more security to people. Yeah. Okay, so the price will never be stable, right? It will not stay at 13K, but it will always go up for whatever reasons, like OKX withdrawals are halted, so all these whales, they cannot get out their money, or they do want to sell their Bitcoin, and there's a sell pressure, right? Exactly. So that's one. And then another thing is, this Fortune 500 companies are buying Bitcoin, and then they're saying the news. First they buy, the price went up, then they're saying the news, and then the retail is coming, like all that FOMO, right? So hype is still going to be there. I think there will be a correction for some amount, but in the long run, right? I always take like 2 years perspective. It's always going up.
Yeah, and do you think the scarcity argument though is still kind of true when the synthetic market is now bigger than the underlying market? Like, does the scarcity element really still apply? Like, because obviously, economic theory would tell you there's only 21 million units, so that means, well, price can only really go up unless there's really no demand. Even with a little bit of demand, you would expect price to go up because, well, there's only 21 million. Well, there's not even 21 million yet, but but in reality, there's a vast amount of Bitcoin that isn't counted in that 21 million. Whether that be synthetics, whether it be even, as Bitcoin gets more expensive. You're talking about sats instead of Bitcoin. Most people can't afford one Bitcoin in the world at this point, but they can buy some sats. What happens when it gets to the point where they can only buy, they can't even buy a sat? Does the scarcity argument, so is that a valid argument, you think, the scarcity argument? Or is that was that valid 5 years ago, but now kind of not so much?
You mean
the argument that just because it's scarce, it has to increase in value?
Well, it's not just the scarce, it's the demand, right? So there's a utility that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
Because Bitcoin is everything, right? It's trying to store value to I don't know, like smart contracts, even like on the layer 2. Yeah. So is the demand, so there's because there's a demand because there's scarcity, right? Yeah. And then you can do financial instruments on top of Bitcoin, like you can do leverage, right? Like in DeFi, you can do in Bitcoin, you give it as a collateral. Yeah. You loan out, you borrow USDT, you give USDT as a collateral, and then you get the USDC, and then you get like 3-4x leverage. So you created wealth thanks to Bitcoin. Look, and there's a demand, right? And it's like with the DeFi tokens, right? I had a good chat in London here with all these blockchain people. I'm like, but hey, it's wealth creation, like it's kind of strange multiplayer creation. You just create tokens and they have value. Well, they will have value until somebody buys them. It's same with
the market creates the value.
Yeah, so but it's same with the painting, right? Like, hey, I painted that. I'm telling the price is 10,000, but the value is not there yet until somebody buys it.
Somebody buys it. It's like valuations with companies. Yeah, you can write anything you want on a piece of paper until you close that first round. You know, that valuation.
So that's how this is created. And
it's a good point. It's a good point. Art, I think most people misunderstand how art is priced as well. I mean, art. It may say it's worth. It may say it's priceless, but if someone's willing to sell it for 50 million and someone's willing to pay it, it's worth 50 million. So yeah, very good point. All right, we have a few questions that came in. By the way, guys, if you ask a question, and girls, we gotta have a few girls out there. Hopefully, maybe like 2. I don't know how many girls are in crypto. There's more now than there ever was, so that's good. But if you ask a question, I'm gonna pick the best one. Not right there in the show, but I'm gonna pick the best one, and I'm gonna send you 1,000 XCM, so 1,000 of CoinMetro's native tokens. So make sure you ask your questions. I'm gonna scroll up here. You're gonna see me working my mouse. Okay, so this is from Jet Fuel 12 on YouTube. Do you think Bitcoin will challenge gold as a store of value?
It's already doing that.
Definitely challenging, that's for sure. Do you think it overcomes gold?
They have different utility because gold is something you can touch and you can create some goods out of that.
Yeah.
With Bitcoin, you can never do that. You can use that for easy transfer, but the gold, you can utilize that to make some stuff, some real world
medical stuff and electronics. And
so wherever it's used, right? Yeah. So they will be working together, and I think there's going to be like rebalancing of someone's investments. Like something will go into Bitcoin, something will stay in gold. You know, all this old school, like OG people, right? Who don't know Bitcoin, like Peter Schiff, right? They're gonna.
Yeah, Peter Schiff loves his gold, that's for sure. I guess at some point, the world's not getting, young people are coming. So as more young people come out, the shift to Bitcoin may happen for more of store of value. Maybe gold loses its kind of store of value moniker as we progress the next 20, 30 years. But you're right, the utility won't go away. But what does that mean for the price? Maybe gold ends up being priced much lower than it currently is because it's priced only for its utility.
There's another argument that what if we find a lot more gold, so it's not going to be any more scarce, and it's easy to produce it. Like on an asteroid, like in 10 years, right? Or 15 years. So.
Or some sign. I mean, the alchemists have been trying to.
But with the Bitcoin, it will never happen, right? There's always 21 mil. That's it.
Very true. This might be a joke question, but what's the future of Bitcoin Cash?
I don't even know how many clones are there. I'm not the one to answer that. So
I guess
you can do this.
I've talked to Roger Ver a few times. I mean, Bitcoin. I got to tell you, Bitcoin Cash as a payment vehicle in certain economies does it better than Bitcoin. In certain very local economies, does it better than Bitcoin. But on the global scale, it doesn't have the name Bitcoin, and it also doesn't have the same. I would say Bitcoin almost has an intrinsic value at this point as it builds a community. There's lots of community behind Bitcoin. And so
I would answer that too. So so PayPal started to also offering buying and selling of Bitcoin Cash, and there has to be a community behind it. There has to be a developers, and I think they're doing now something. They released something that Bitcoin doesn't have. Maybe smart contracts on layer 1. I'm not sure something, but as long as there's a community and they're just moving forward, it will have some value and use case.
Agreed, yeah. If someone uses it, it has a use. If it has a use, it has a utility. If it has a utility, it has a value. Yeah,
exactly.
So I agree with that. So do you have a few extra, can we take 5 minutes and go through these questions, you think?
No problem.
Okay, let's see. So when will we reach the chain link singularity? I guess chain link connecting the world, I guess is what that means.
Well, look, there are competitors too, like Band protocol, right?
There's a lot of competitors.
Chainlink is cool. I remember Sergey Lazarov, like 6 years ago, he had this website, smartcontract.com. And back then on the BitDevs in New York, he was talking about that, right? And look where he is now. He believed it's going to be the future. Just like we believed in 1314, Bitcoin is going to be the future for underbanked and unbanked people. So same thing with him. And of course, if we take this final goal, like everything will be on blockchain, like finance and I know everything else, right? It will move eventually to blockchain. You need to have oracles.
Yeah, I think future kind of always is best to the bold, right? It favors the bold. So obviously, just like Paxful was bold back in 2013 when nobody thought, any of this was going to happen in 2012. Chainlink, the guy, Sergey was bold. He went out and did what he did. And you can't say he kind of. I mean, look at the market cap. Look at what they've done. Look at what even if they don't do anything else, and Chainlink's value pretty much stays where it is now.
Right.
That's a success. I mean, he brought it together. He's the guy who started the Oracle kind of phenomenon. There might be companies there's companies coming out really trying to take him off his pedestal, and he's going to have to work doubly hard to make sure he stays there.
Yeah, it's a healthy thing. There are competitors.
Exactly. Yeah. So, Bjorn, are you planning some sort of collaboration, sirs? Thank you. I don't know. That might be a crack at me because I'm bald. I feel old now. Sirs, we are in initial discussions about possibly some form of collaboration. Yes, to expand some of the services that Paxful offers to its clients, and to potentially probably bring on some liquidity to
right. So exactly. So I mean, I can say that where Paxful is going, we need fiat on ramps, off ramps, and if CoinMetro CoinMetro will give us a really easy way for our customers, their customers, to buy, sell crypto without using our marketplace. Yeah. That's the win for us.
So we're working on it. Let's put it that way. We're working on it. So we'll see where it leads. So do you think Lightning Network will ever deliver a good user experience? Is it really the future of Bitcoin?
So it's like we are like now in Bitcoin 2010, 11 with Lightning Network. So, and as long as they're builders, right? But all the focus is now on the DeFi and all these builders, developers going there because there's more money to be made now there, unfortunately. Unfortunately, right? Yeah. Like we're going into LN about payments, micropayments, or we're going into DeFi about moving whole financial system, Wall Street, to on the blockchain, right? Where do you want to go? Where are the people? Like 95% here in DeFi, 5% in LN, the same people.
Yeah, I think Lightning Network had a chance to have a couple of years where they were kind of the focus. And they kind of failed to really push their network and get enough liquidity to make it really useful for more people. Plus, they kind of it's even maybe a case of timing. They either came out too soon or too late.
I would say, you know what is the issue here? Because they're really, really testing their stuff. Yeah. So that there's not much Bitcoin locked in the mainnet. Yeah. But in DeFi, it's only the degens, right? There's 1 billion money.
Yeah, in 10 minutes, there's $1 billion locked. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think maybe because it's just the whales are just playing with their like DeFi money, and that's why they don't really care. But in the land, they're more careful and it takes more time, right? So
agreed. Yeah, attention has definitely been pulled away from say let's use Bitcoin at Starbucks. To let's create wealth using, currently Ethereum, Bitcoin's on its way for sure. There are people working on Bitcoin DeFi. So any thoughts on proof of work versus proof of stake? Do you think electricity consumption will affect future proof of work blockchains?
Well, look, the thing is that there needs to be a really good proof of stake blockchain that's going to show, and that this scale of Bitcoin, that it's really going to work and all these game mechanics and incentives are aligned. We'll see with Ethereum 2.0 how it's going to be. This is like the beacon chain, the 64 shards, right?
Shards of shards.
Yeah. And how they do migration with like 3 years migration plan. Yeah. But again, proof of work is the one that secures the network, and it's the best now, right? I was thinking about this for so long, right? Because I like proof of work because you have to give it your power, right?
Yeah.
But the proof of stake is the whales that are controlling.
Exactly. It's who owns the assets that you control. I think what people forget though about proof of work, because I've had a few conversations with actually Dr. Doom. Right? Dr. Doom, I had a conversation in London at one point. We talked about his whole thing was on this proof of work and how it wasn't going to too much electricity, et cetera. But imagine, let's DeFi might not be in Bitcoin yet, but imagine just finance in general on a blockchain, decentralized finance in some way, shape, or form, and a bank, the way they operate. A bank has a tower in the middle of the city center, and there's 10 to 15,000 employees. They all have cars. They all use the lights. They all have internet connections. They're using massive amounts of power. Every day they go to power that bank. Bitcoin does that just like a million banks do around the world with no infrastructure except nodes, the amount of power Bitcoin uses, I would imagine, is actually dwarfed by what the financial sector actually uses.
That's a good argument too, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's actually a lot more electricity used to power the payments and kind of all this.
All the cars to get there,
yeah.
and then all the power, and then the air conditioning, and then everything. The people eating lunch that work there, all those things, all that consumption is actually hurting the planet, hurting the environment. So I think it's a rather, obviously because they're both working right now. But if you had a day where there was no banks and just Bitcoin, for example, we would be using less power consumption for sure.
Yeah,
without doubt. All right, let's see. Do you think Bitcoin will hold its value if we go into a full 1930s depression mode?
that's a really tough question. I like questions, so really good questions here coming. It's like economical, like theories, assumptions, right? I mean, I can only give example or like speculate. So what happened in March when the stock price went down, Bitcoin price went down. Because everybody wants to get out into cash still.
USD.
Cash is king.
USD.
Cash is king, right? Again, same thing here. When there's going to be economic depression, I hope there will not be, people want to get out into cash.
Yeah.
So my answer is yes.
Yeah. I would echo that comment in the fact that the thing is that, well, there's one caveat. If it happens 20 years, if it happens now, tomorrow, then yes, everybody's going to go to, and probably primarily US dollars, to be fair. It used to be yen and Swedish, and not Swedish, but Swiss francs. But those carry trades and things like that are years in the past, and now people run to USD. So I would agree. But if it happens in 20 or 30 years, when let's pretend that Bitcoin has now become, or not, maybe not even Bitcoin, crypto in general, some crypto asset that's not issued by the government. It's not a CBDC. It's something that's been issued publicly or privately.
Okay.
And it starts to take over the payment rails, and it starts to take over some of the systems that are used by the financial markets in general. Then potentially the run to cash wouldn't be to cash, it would be to the Bitcoin. Because if the run to cash is basically because if everything goes to shit, I want to be able to, I know what cash is, it's going to be probably accepted still at some point.
Exactly, it's going to be still accepted. Bitcoin is not.
Bitcoin, what if all the internet goes offline? Who's accepting Bitcoin at that point? So I think it's...
That's why you want gold or cash.
Yeah, that's why you want gold or cash. That's probably not going to change unless the infrastructure changes to an extent that a crypto asset or a non-fiat asset has that same ability, like that tangibility to be able to spend it, and it still works. Good question though. Andre from Parsec, nice to see you guys on a live stream together. So shout out from Andre.
What's up, Andre? I like the next question.
How do you feel about Bitcoin's value as we enter more and more into DeFi? Will Bitcoin survive with wrapped solutions, or will we? Hey, you're going out of the frame.
That's social distance.
Yeah. I'll move over a bit. Here we go. Will Bitcoin survive with wrapped solutions, or will we see Bitcoin fizzle out since it can't interact fluidly?
So look, honestly, what's happening now in DeFi, I've been into that for 3 months. It's a huge circle jerk of whales.
Yeah.
And why the Bitcoin is going now into DeFi, so people can borrow stable coins so they can farm more tokens.
Yep. That's where the liquidity is, like we said.
Yeah, so look, my conclusion, and a bunch of other people, like we have a group of watching people here in town, in London, right, and in New York, is that there's a lot of tech. There's a lot of tech in DeFi, in Bitcoin, but there are no actual use cases. Let me give you an example of what's happening now in Africa. Like in Sierra Leone, there's a fisherman every morning, he goes to bank to take out a loan, and by the end of the day, he pays it back 20% interest on top. Well, I mean, and it's his habit that he has to stand in the line, right? And then, okay, this thing he already does better. He sends his son or somebody to stand in the line, and then he buys like gasoline or some equipment for fish, and then he sells it on the market and pays back at the end of the day, right? It's insanely cumbersome. So we can help that with the DeFi, that you can take a cheaper loan, right? Like we can move money freely. For example, you can borrow at the 0% in UK, and you can deposit that into Aave, decentralized money maker protocol, and then you can borrow for example, in Kenya, that money with the much cheaper rates than locally within M-Pesa. So what we're missing is the off-ramps, on-ramps.
Yeah.
So you get your USDC, whatever, your stablecoin, now you have to get it into people's online wallet, into M-Pesa, cheaper cash, whatever.
Yeah.
So that is the missing link.
You got to get to cash somehow.
Yes, and easy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what we are solving here.
Yeah.
So again, Brad, Bitcoin, in my opinion, is now in DeFi to farm, because the point was that, right? The idea of the DeFi was like, for example, the guy from Compound, he founded it. He said, like, okay, I'm sitting here on my Ethereum assets. I want to make money with that. How do I make money with that?
Yeah, rather than just waiting for the price to go.
Yeah, like, oh, I can give this as an over collateral and lend out stable coins to others. Brilliant.
Yeah, I think the point that the end point of that is that the liquidity currently sits with the most liquidity sits with Bitcoin. If liquidity maintains if Bitcoin maintains that kind of king of crypto liquidity stance, to be honest, Bitcoin invented decentralized finance. Let's be fair. What we call DeFi today is really about the Ethereum and all these ways to kind of create wealth out of nowhere, basically, and be able to have all these collateral mechanisms. But decentralized finance.
What's in your opinion, decentralized finance? Yeah.
Well, it's finance decentralized. As simple as that. So I think the term
payments.
It means anything to do with finance that removes intermediaries and middlemen and creates a direct kind of peer-to-peer style system. So if I buy stocks, I don't have to go to NASDAQ. I can just literally go online, buy a stock, settle with somebody else. There might be a contract in the middle that settles and escrow, and so I don't get screwed or they don't get screwed. That's decentralized finance. Or exact payments, same thing. I don't have to go through Visa or MasterCard. I don't have to have a branded card. I have my own address, my own wallet, my own whatever, and I can go direct to the merchant. They don't have to pay a fee. I'm not paying any fees. I'm not paying interest. Maybe I'm then into some collateral contract where I get a loan for a week, where I pay a very small amount of interest versus a credit card, but I'm not relying. So it's just about removing, really, I think at the core, it's removing intermediaries.
Less middleman in the middle. Yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, we don't need them, right?
And Bitcoin is started decentralized finance. Literally, without Bitcoin, wouldn't be here. And Bitcoin is decentralized, and it's used for finance. So I don't think, as long as Bitcoin remains this big liquidity engine, it's not going anywhere.
All right.
If it goes from being, it's obviously going to lose at some point. It's not going to be 60% of the market. That's almost impossible. At some point, it's going to have to lose some of that back to some other assets that come on. Maybe it's Ethereum, maybe it's something else. But eventually, it's going to have to. Why? Because there's so many other use cases that are going to come. We have use cases now that are growing, and there's going to be more use cases in the future. But as long as it maintains even, imagine a market.
You need that base currency like Ethereum, right?
Yeah.
You need that.
And imagine it's like going on a stock market and having one stock own 60% of all the liquidity. So no, but even if you own 10% of liquidity, you're massive, because the market's grown to a certain extent. That 10% is trillions. So yeah, I don't see that as being Bitcoin's downfall.
Right.
Arthur, is there? Okay, we already mentioned the collaboration point. Oh, I think we just hold on. Very big screen, but zoomed in. All right, here we go. From Brian, what do you think about recent events with closing by regulators of famous exchanges? Do you think Binance will share their fate? Is there a place in current market for unregulated exchanges?
That's a good question, right? So I think it comes down to knowing where your users are coming from, right? If you're saying, I don't, for example, serve US customers, you have to prove it that, like, oh, you just ban IP, and then you can just go around with the VPN. That's not the best way to do this, right? And that's why the regulations are out there, right? I mean, in one country, you're doing the God's work, with the same work in another country, you're a criminal, right?
You're breaking every law in the books.
Yeah,
exactly.
So that's why regulations are actually good, right? But again, they should be opening the doors, not closing the doors. And that's why Bitcoin is where it is now, right? It's not like anarchist dream or, this initial Bitcoin philosophy that no KYC, no AML, you can just buy, exchange randomly, anonymously. Like, we're not there anymore. Right? It's a different world, 2020.
Don't go on Twitter and say, come at me, bro, to the SEC or the CFTC. That's pretty much the moral of the story. I think AML law, the way they got Al Capone in the US, the famous mafia guy, they tried to bring him down on every charge in the book. They never could. They got him with tax evasion. When you try to fight the government, especially on things that do with finance, you lose most of the time. And so I think we are going to see more and more specifically around AML and money laundering, probably to most of the larger exchanges and some of the smaller ones, to be fair as well. But the thing is that the government, because it'd be difficult for them to go into China and try to make different charges, but they definitely want to make sure that these exchanges know where the provenance of money is coming from, and none of them are doing what they need to do to be able to do that. The AML in most of these large exchanges is non-existent, or hold up a piece of paper with your name on it that says how much money you have in your bank account, kind of, very, very remedial efforts. So that's going to have to change. That doesn't mean they're all going to get arrested and thrown in jail either. But I do think you're going to start to see mergers and acquisitions. So where we may see Fidelity now coming into the space, PayPal, I wouldn't be surprised if in 3 or 4 years, PayPal buys Binance's client base, and Binance, walks away.
Well, Binance is now worth more than PayPal.
Yeah. That's true on paper, I guess. But that's probably assets they already own. So if they left, they would take those with them. But their client base has a value, which is not worth more than PayPal.
Right.
Yeah. So you're right, though. They probably have more money than PayPal in terms of Bitcoin and BNB.
I think now we're in the age of compliance. So us verifying every user, from every Western country, and soon to be like all the deep south as well. Yeah. So this is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree.
And people want to KYC. Look, the ones who don't want to, right? They don't have to restart platform. Yeah, they have a reason, but everybody else, they're just happy because they're used to it, right? When you want to buy a SIM card, you have to give your password. So
I think people are used. Not only, I understand about data security, and there are things that you need to be worried about when you're giving up your data. That's for sure. But if you're trusting a company with your money transacting through it, you should trust them enough with your data. Because to be fair, money is data at this point. And if you're going to lose your data, then you should be doing this.
Look, the biggest issue and worry for me, and that keeps me up at night, is the UI for KYC, like the user experience, right? Because look, maybe I know I need to do in a broad light, and it shouldn't be blurry and so on, but other people don't do this. And then again, the biggest thing is for me, when a person wants to do something on Paxful, he really wants to upload his ID and get verified, but the system is saying it's not possible. That's what keeps me up at night, because I want to fix it for them. It's the same for me, right? I want to do something on CoinMetro, whatever, and I know that the website is broken or something.
Yeah.
That's bad.
It's not saying CoinMetro is broken, by the way.
Yeah.
It's just an example.
I just want something that's related.
But understood. That's true. Obviously, we have the same issue. You try to make that experience as user-friendly as you possibly can, and at some point, you can't really make it any more. There's some things you just can't make more friendly because you're using a third party or you have others. But
there's few things okay, when the third party is giving an exception, an error, your ID is too blurry, right? That's it. But then we have to tell to the user what he has to ID is too blurry. Please go to a place where there's more light.
No glare.
Yes.
So we're going to take about another 11 minutes. At the top of the hour, we're going to cut it off. We're going to keep going. We'll stay here all night if we wanted to, but we all have things to do. So Link's lead. Do you think crypto will be the next investment method of the newer generations, or is it going to stay this way forever? I think we kind of answered this one already in that.
Right. There's gold and everything. Yeah.
I guess, gold's not going anywhere, literally, but definitely young people, just like young people are changing the way they look at home ownership and ownership of cars. Everything's becoming decentralized, to be fair. A lot of things that older generations used to really focus on, younger generations just don't necessarily care. So. Oliver, what is the cryptocurrency of the future? And what is the cryptocurrency of the future, and why is it Dogecoin?
That's a good one.
It's a good one. I got to give it to Dogecoin. The guy who started it literally said it was a meme, and publicly, and it still exists. People still use it, and people still make money. Obviously, lose money probably as well. Right. But I guess it goes to show how, I don't know. I'm come from traditional markets, and it's you never see something like a Dogecoin in traditional markets. You'll see penny stocks that are kind of fraudulent, and they go and they come and they might spike 1,000,000% and then crash. Okay, fine. But you never see anything where someone creates an asset and then goes, this is not real, guys. Don't really trade. And then people just go and trade it.
It's two things. It's a hype, and then
if it's something that is forbidden, you tell it's forbidden, people want to buy it.
Yeah, and it's a truly open market, which you can't really say.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, as regulations come in, the open market does start to get a bit rough around the edges. But Dogecoin literally proves the fact that crypto is an open market. Because even the issuer didn't want people to buy it, and they still, I mean, Uniswap's another example. Anybody can go list anything on Uniswap. You don't even need to be the creator. You can just list something if you're willing to provide liquidity for it. So it's definitely a different ballgame than traditional markets. What are your thoughts on Monero in the next 50 years? Long time. Will it get banned by governments?
That's a good question. Honestly, again, I never used Monero like as a crypto guy. I am because I don't have a personal reason for that.
Yeah.
So it's a privacy coin, and it has a built-in features to like reveal who is behind the transaction. So it's still going to be there, right?
Yeah.
That's my thoughts about that.
Just like Dogecoin, you can't get rid of it. Once it's out there, it's out there. I think regulators, I know when I talk to regulators, one of the first things now for the last year or so, first questions they ask is, do you list privacy coins? We don't. And they say, next question, they move on. There are, though, regulators in the US especially that are starting to allow the listing of privacy coins. I think that what that tells me is the US has probably cracked already some of that code, or they have a way, at least some way with massive amounts of data to be able to try and track some of those payments. But I think if you can make it, you can break it.
So actually, I know one thing.
Yeah.
Let's assume it's banned by the government.
Yeah.
But since it still has its use case, it will have some worth, right? The same thing
Probably
was
more
like,
worth, to be fair.
yeah. So it was like 5-6 years ago about Bitcoin as well. Like people would say like, oh, if the government bans Bitcoin, what is going to price be? Since its use case, let's say, was in a dark market, and then I don't know how much volume is there going on. So this much would be the market cap for that specific use case. So same in Monero, right? If it's banned, but it still has a use case, and how much people need that, and that would be its market cap.
And to be fair, cash is anonymous. And so the government is okay with a certain amount of anonymity when you pay for things, because they still allow cash. Obviously, CBDC is a whole nother ballgame because that's going to be cash, but traceable and auditable. So it's kind of scary from that privacy perspective. But I think they're okay with a certain level of privacy. If you're going to spend a couple €100 or a couple $100, you can do it with cash now anyway. So I think that also might be one reason why the US kind of said okay, but there's probably limitations. If you send, $1 million on Monero, there's probably going to be an issue.
Yeah.
But if you send a couple hundred, maybe 1,000, maybe there's not so much of an issue. People need their privacy, but we also need security. So there's always like a balance in that. When will you delist Ripple? I guess that's probably from us. When
Ripple $5.
Yeah. When enough people ask us to do it and people stop trading it, I guess we'll delist it. Do you think cryptos will avoid or provoke banks taxing fees on user accounts with electronic money? Read that again. Do you think cryptos will avoid or provoke banks from taxing fees on user accounts with electronic money? So will it avoid people from getting kind of fees, lots of fees, or will it provoke banks to charge more fees?
Well, look, that's the thing that the news came out in the US, that banks can now custody Bitcoin, right? So it's going to be just like cash, right? You can get interest, you can borrow it again with the interest. So it's going to be the same thing, right? It's what, 0.5% you will get on top because they can do fractional reserve with Bitcoin. I mean, that's where we're eventually going to, right?
For sure, 100%. They're not going to change that law. That's for sure. In your opinion, what is the fair value of BTC now? 1 year, 5 year outlook. How do you think? Do you think we're in a bull market that will attempt to break all-time highs?
So I always look at two-year perspective in Bitcoin, and I'm long in Bitcoin. I don't day trade, and in 2 years it's always going to be more in value than 2 years ago. So every day the confidence is bigger and bigger, and more like institutions are coming in. Right, first they buy the coins, and then they reveal the news like, hey, we bought the coins, 10% of our reserves. So the price will go up in value, like definitely. 2 years, every 2 years it's going up in value. Maybe now there's going to be small correction. I don't know, next three months. End of the year. Exchanges. I mean, the VCs or the hedge funds have to dump their coins, right? To take their profits or losses. But then again, the cycle will repeat.
I think to play devil's advocate a bit, I think there's one scenario that could play out where, if you look at any other market, fictitious markets, I say fictitious, like stock markets that are overinflated, that are always like multipliers. And the system is literally built for you to take debt from the US government. That's called money, fiat money. That's debt, a debt note. And basically, you don't want to hold that debt note because it has inflation behind it. So you push it into the market, which inflates the market, which brings the money from the poor people to the rich people. That's literally how markets function. And they function, but maybe not so well for most of us. So I think one scenario that could play out is that we have Bitcoin that once enough big players like Fidelity and these guys start to really get in, that they artificially manipulate the market once they control enough to make the price tank so they can acquire the vast majority. And then basically you end up with a very stable but very high price for Bitcoin that the normal people can't get access to. And that's historically what's happened in financial markets since like year zero. Hopefully it doesn't happen here, but I think it's a possible, maybe not plausible, but it's a possible scenario. That could have even been the last crash to 3K, to be fair.
Yeah, we'll see. But
Yeah.
we're long, we're bullish.
So here, I think everybody's bullish. We wouldn't be sitting here. I guess we probably weren't. Daniel P. So here's a good one. So what do you smart heads see happening with the markets? If Trump wins or Biden in the U.S. election?
Nothing gonna change.
So I think long run, I think Artur is right, 100%. In the short term, though, historically speaking, of course, saying historically speaking in 2020 is like fucking nonsense to be fair. But historically speaking, when you have a first-time incumbent president of a party and they lead and they don't get reelected, which has only happened one or two times in the recent 50, 60 years. I think we had Bush Senior. And was it Carter maybe? And that's it. One Republican, one Democrat, I think, if my memory serves me. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Usually what would happen is you're going to see an abrupt, especially a presidency like Donald Trump, he took away a lot of regulation that he took away with executive orders, meaning the next president can put them right back in come January 1st, which he would do. Democrats would do that. It'd be the first thing they do just to kind of show that Trump is out of office and that there's a new sheriff in town. And that probably means you're going to see, if he gets elected in November, Biden, you'll probably see profit taking in equity markets up until January. So you'll probably see a little spike and then a abrupt crash, 20, 30% equity markets across the board, profit taking happening because they don't want to pay excess tax come January, come the end of the quarter. So that would be short-lived. So, come March, come next quarter after that, we'd probably see it get back to normal. If Trump wins, I would expect the markets to maintain their bullish outlook while they keep pumping money in. And how long that lasts is anybody's guess. Can't last forever.
Yeah, so basically, because with the Trump, it's known that he's going to continue his line. It's going to be stable.
Yep.
But with the Biden, it's like uncertainty for some time.
Yep.
People want to be safe, right? They get out, whatever, and then it goes back.
There's a statement about it's better the evil you know than the evil you don't. So it's like you may not like Trump, but you know what he's about, at least at this point, so you know what's going to happen. It's very true. Uncertainty is the worst thing for markets, that's for sure. Right. So who would you vote for is the other question. Obviously, I'm a U.S. citizen. I have no skin in the game, to be honest. I'm a U.S. citizen, but other than that, I don't live there. So to be fair, I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. I think, again, the evil you know, the evil you don't. I would probably vote for Trump. And it's not because I generally, to be fair, some of the things he's done I like, some of the things he's done I don't like. I think he's not the most articulate of a person when he talks, which is probably something you kind of want in a president. But in reality, his policies align more with my business. And my business is like 80% of my life. And then I have family. And so if the businesses go on, the family's going to have some problems. So for me, I would vote Trump. Yeah,
I think that the path is correct because it's about the US in general, because before you as a company would move like all your manufacturing outside US, but now this environment is better to keep everything in US, right? Because look, if we go about like maximizing the profits of corporations and so on, like we would go to China or wherever where we can produce much cheaper. Yeah. But there's a huge geopolitical thing happening with the corona. What if whole manufacturing that is happening in China, in Asia, will be cut, and you won't get any supplies back into US? So that is the bet, right? Like, hey, let's keep some things in our country. Maybe it's more expensive, but let's cut the taxes for that. So
let's take one last question.
Yeah.
So we got Jizzle Sizzle. I think that's pronounced Sizzle. Maybe Kizzle. Might be Jizzle Kizzle. I don't know. I have to call Snoop and see how to pronounce this one.
Okay.
For crypto assets to become a secure investment during a crisis, the ecosystem ought to work offline to match the practicality of dollar cash. What do you see as a solution to get to that point? It's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. Look, first thing you said, it's an investment, so you don't need to have this as a cash. As long as you know you can access that anytime, not any time, but you have an access to that later at any point of time, and you know how, it's totally fine. Plus, again, we're in 2020, there are custodials with whom you can keep the money, who have their private keys, your private keys, whether secured, so you have the certainty that you can get it back, right? Maybe not like the next minute, but let's say like 48 hours, you can get it back. So if you have the certainty and they guarantee you that, it's secure investment.
Yeah. Obviously, I think it's already a secure investment. It depends on where your investment is. Just like any investment can be secure or not secure, depending on how you actually allocate that investment. So I would say we're already at a point where it can be secure. It's not very user-friendly secure. And so if your question is more like the whole grandma scenario, like how do we get to the point? Because obviously, if you're new into this and you want to get involved, it's easier than it was 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 10 years ago for sure. But it's still not, I wouldn't call it easy. There's still a learning curve. That learning curve is still pretty steep. So obviously both Paxful and CoinMetro are working toward the goal. One of our goals, obviously, on both companies is clearly to make the user experience better and to get the ability for these fiat on-ramps to connect and to get the ability for people to be able to transact and have methods that they can onboard. Because if you can't onboard, no matter how secure the investment is, if you can't get into that, and that's I think the other part of your question is practicality. So practicality is all about user experience. And part of that is working, I think we're starting to get into this area now where companies are working with regulators, not running away from them. We have to do that. If you're not, you can't, to change something from the outside, lots of things need to happen, meaning almost everyone needs to change their mind to have that change happen from the outside. If you do the change from the inside, you only need one person. You get the right person to change their mind. Look at the OCC, the Office of the Comptroller in the US. Used to work at Coinbase. Coinbase, I'm not a big fan of Coinbase because I'm in the same business, competitor, whatever. But what I will say about Coinbase is they trained that guy really well. Like that guy, he left Coinbase as their head of legal, and in 3 weeks on the job, if there's a reason why PayPal, banks are now able to custody. There's a reason why you're starting to see balance sheets start to get Bitcoin. And it's because of him. Almost wholly in part, it's because of the OCC. And so I think that from that end, we need people like that. So we need to, Artur at Paxful, me at CoinMetro, we need to foster this, doing these type of things, talking to people. We need to foster this idea that we're ready to work with the government, with the regulators. We're ready to, that doesn't mean we want to stifle our business. We're going to have an open dialogue. It's not just be like, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. That's what we're going to do. But there needs to be open dialogue. And that's what we're doing. And I think that's how we get there. It's not an overnight, it's not going to happen tomorrow. But to be fair, if you do enough research, and it's already a secure investment, I think.
I would add here, look, when you're investing into Bitcoin, you need to have a strategy. Like, you're going to hold it for 2 years, or you're going to act on your emotions when the market tanks, you want to sell it right away, right? And then you will have to know, like, oh, I'm going to act by emotions, I want to sell it right away. I need to get access to that instantly. Yeah. But then you can have a custody, you need to hold it yourself. But when you know you're going to keep it for 2 years, I can give it to somebody and that's it. And then I'm not going to act by emotions when something happens with markets.
Great questions, guys. Thank you for sending in your questions. There was a few beauties in there. It's going to be hard to pick a winner. So thanks for that. I think we'll wrap it up there. We'll spend about 1 hour and 4 minutes, so we went way over our 30-minute time limit. Thank you, Artur, for hanging around and actually answering
that. That was
questions.
an interesting good one.
And we'll be back again tomorrow and Thursday and Friday. We're going to have new people on each day. There's going to be a lot of exciting talks, so make sure you follow us on Facebook and Twitter. And wherever you happen to be watching, make sure you follow. Check it out tomorrow. I think tomorrow might be 1 hour earlier, so make sure you tune in and check the event as well on Facebook. Thank you guys for stopping by. Thanks for being here. Thanks to Artur from Paxful.
Thank you.
And until next time. Cheers.